episode 2 of STEM Think Talk About. I'm your host, Charles Remillard, and today on the show I've got a good friend of mine. His name is Henry Wolf from Denver, Colorado. So Henry, welcome to STEM Think Talk About. How you doing today?
Good, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. So Henry, if you could start off by just kind of explaining a little bit about what it is that you do. We know that as a big part of the engineering design process, a big part of it is defining a problem. So what are some of the problems that on a daily basis you have to confront in the position that you're in?
Okay, so I'm a civil engineer by training, and my focus within civil engineering is structural engineering, specifically bridges. And so typical types of problems that I solve are basically the design and construction of bridges. So every bridge has its own challenges. Some of them are based on things like the environment that it's built in. So whether it's crossing a large body of water like the bridge behind you, or whether it's built in a busy urban area, in which case it's hard to build. So all sorts of challenges and problems arise when building bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that you're a structural engineer. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Which is within the realm of civil engineering.
exactly.
Nice.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah, go
civil
ahead.
engineering. Yeah, civil engineering is under the umbrella of civil engineering. Basically, civil engineering involves any type of infrastructure that's used by the public, and so that would include things like roads, bridges, rivers, water, or like water resources, dams, buildings, and any number of things that people use on a daily basis. So that all falls under the realm of civil engineering. And then in that, for all those different resources, there's different disciplines that focus on different aspects of building and designing those things.
So, as you were going through your coursework in college and whatnot, what was kind of the path that you ended up taking in order to get to the position that you're in today? Because it sounds like you probably could have gone a couple different ways in civil engineering.
Yeah, so basically I went, middle school and high school just like all your students, and I went to college. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which is a good engineering school. I recommend you all look at it as you start to begin your college search. So I went there for school, and in your first year or so, you take a lot of just general elective type courses. So you'll have your higher level calculus and differential equations, your physics and chemistry and stuff like that. And then by the time you get to your late sophomore or junior year, you'll start doing a little more specialized stuff.
So, did you take? I'm assuming that you must have tried to take calculus in high school as well. Did you take calculus 1 in high school?
I took calculus 1 and 2 in high school, actually.
Oh, wow.
I was able
Nice.
to take Calc BC, and then you take the AP test. And if you do well enough on that, then you can get college credit for it. So that's how I did it.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
In those classes, you'll take like the introductory transportation engineering, which will focus on like roadway design and things like that. You'll do an introductory structural engineering class. You'll do an introductory geotechnical engineering, which is the study of soil and so forth. And then water resources. Many basically every subdiscipline you'll get exposed to. Environmental engineering is also under the purview of civil engineering. And so you can take like 5 or so of those, and you'll get exposed to them. And then from there, you decide on what you want your primary area of focus to be, and then your secondary area of focus to be. And so my primary area of focus was structural engineering, and then my secondary area of focus was materials. But then in a lot of civil engineering disciplines, especially structural engineering, a bachelor's degree, which is what you get after your first 4 years of college, is normally not enough education. And so most jobs actually require that you have a master's degree as well to actually be doing bridge design. So
Hmm.
I stuck around for another couple of years and got a master's degree there as well. And then when you're doing your master's degree, it's pretty much all higher level structural engineering classes.
Hmm. Okay, cool. So, now what was kind of so obviously you had to come to a point where like in college you had to decide what was going to be your primary and secondary. So what was that made you lean towards structural engineering, and then as well as within structural engineering, what made you like go towards bridges?
Sure. So I guess as I said, you get exposed to all the disciplines and stuff, and structural engineering was just always the one that um, I was most interested in. I remember taking those other classes and being surprised at how much I liked the other ones, like transportation and materials and environmental and things like that. But I think ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to do I knew I always wanted to do structures. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, there's sort of another crossroads that you get when you decide you want to do structures. The two main structures you can work on with the structural engineering degree or focus are bridges or buildings, and that's not limited. There's structural engineers who work for Boeing, and they'll design aerospace structures. So like plane is a really advanced structure, and so there's a lot of structural engineers who go on to work for Boeing or for Intel or something. So they're doing microstructures at the smallest level, imaginable. But the main two most common are buildings and bridges. And so I always wanted I was interested in both, but I think the thing that really drove home for me was I was looking at this building that was getting built on campus, and I'd ride my bike past it every day. And I'd watch the building go up story by story, and I was really marveling at how cool the structure was. It was a big concrete two-way slab system with columns and stuff like that, and it was really cool to watch it go up. And then one day I rode my bike past it, and suddenly I couldn't see it anymore because they'd started putting up a curtain wall or the windows around the building, and so they wrapped it up, and basically all the structural engineering work was hidden.
Such a
And so
shame.
when you look at a bridge, there's no hiding the bridge. The structure itself and the structural engineer's work is the aesthetic part, and that's what's on display. So no architect's going to cover up your work.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a really cool way of putting it that I never really would have thought of. Um, like bridges, you do really see all the structural work that goes into them, and a lot of buildings, you really don't. So that's pretty interesting that that's kind of what swayed you. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and so obviously the structure of a bridge is like a super obviously important thing because it's going to help us to make sure that we're all safe. Could you go into like a little bit of like maybe some basics when it comes to like the structure of a bridge? Like what are some things that you have to be considering when you're building a bridge and designing
Yeah.
a bridge?
So yeah, when you're designing a bridge, the main things that really drive the design are the environmental aspect. So like what are you trying to cross? Where's this? What's the site basically?
Hmm.
And then going into that even deeper, you have to consider, okay, what if we're crossing a large channel? How deep is the channel? How are we gonna be able to build foundations? If so, are we gonna have to use coffer dams for that? Just different things like that. Um, and also you have to consider where the location is. So again, to use the example of the Golden Gate Bridge behind you, as many of your students probably know, that's a very high seismic region. Seismic is another word for earthquake. So it's very prone to earthquakes, unlike Colorado maybe. So when you design a bridge in Colorado, you're not really concerned about earthquakes. When you design a bridge in a high seismic zone like California or Washington or Alaska or something, you have to really be cognizant of that. And so you have to consider that. Another thing that often gets overlooked is wind. So especially for large spans like that over water, you can imagine how fast the wind is blowing at the midspan of that bridge. And so that's actually what caused probably the most famous bridge collapse in the United States history, the Tacoma Narrows. Basically, it was wind that took down a bridge very similar to that Golden Gate behind you. So lots of factors have to be considered in that, but definitely it's all about the location, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when I think about a bridge like the Golden Gate Bridge or like all these bridges that go over waterways, I have to start thinking about like how on earth, like how are they found, like how are they foundationally sound with all that water there? Like how as engineers have you guys figured out how to make those like do they go all the way down to the ground, or how is it that you guys actually make those foundationally sound?
Yeah, so foundations are super important, and typically typically it's very expensive and very difficult to build those foundations, and so that's why you see these large spans. So when you're going over a large waterway, it's not just because they want to make the longest span they can. They're doing it because they want to build as few of those foundations as possible. The reason they want to do as few as possible is it's really difficult and really expensive, and so to build a foundation in a deep channel like that, you typically would use a cofferdam, which is like a big like pipe or tube or something that they basically bang into the ground. And so it forms a seal with the bottom of the riverbed or the crossing, the channel. And then they pump out all the water. And then from there, they have a dry area. Now they can work in that dry area. And so you can see photos of that if you look online. But also, not all bridges are founded on foundations like that. There are some floating bridges where the foundation is actually floating due to the buoyancy of the water that displaces.
That's incredible. Like the fact that like a bridge could actually be floating, that's carrying tons of weight. Like that's just unreal to me. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Um, so you already talked a little bit about why it was that you decided to choose structural engineering and then even more so bridge engineering. Was that something that you've wanted to do like for a really long time, was structural engineering and bridge engineering?
Yeah. So I think I've always been interested in it. I remember being a kid and going to the beach and spending a lot more time building sandcastles than actually swimming. So I've always just had fun with that, playing with Legos and stuff. It's always been something I'm interested in. I remember visiting my uncle out in Boston one year, and that was during the Big Dig when that was going on, and so there was all this construction around, and I was really intrigued by that. And I think bridges just make sense. They're something that people have experience with from a very early age. They're driving over bridges, they're walking over them, and they're just something that's there all the time. And I think some of them just can be so inspiring. Like people who don't know anything about bridges are still marvel at the Golden Gate Bridge, for example, and just think, "Gosh, that's such a beautiful, impressive structure." So that's definitely
That's
one
really
of the things that
awesome.
got
I
me.
mean, obviously, like bridges play such a huge role in our society, and they help to keep us safe, and they also offer like a lot of like really like actual beauty too. And it's really quite incredible, and it's awesome to hear your sort of passion that you have for that. I just have one last question for you, and that is, what is your favorite type of bridge and why?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different bridge types. Suspension bridges like the Golden Gate are fantastic. They have a sort of a younger brother called the cable stay bridge, which is typically a little shorter span. But those are really beautiful. They can have these really cool harp arrangements and patterns.
Hmm.
But I think at the end of the day, my favorite type of bridge is the arch bridge. And I just think that it's such a simple concept in the sense that even the Romans were building those 500 BC, so they've been building those for a long time. But it's just a very interesting structure type, and it's used everywhere in nature. And there's just really gorgeous examples of it. The Hoover Dam bypass is probably one of my favorite bridges in the world. The Bixby Creek also is another bridge that I love, and both of them are just these beautiful concrete arch bridges.
And have you had the opportunity to actually travel around to see some of these bridges?
Yeah, so I've seen driven over the Golden Gate Bridge. About 2 hours south of the Golden Gate Bridge is the Bixby Creek Bridge over near Big Sur
Hmm.
State Park. Yeah, I love traveling, and
That's great.
definitely one of the highlights of my trips are getting to go check out some of the iconic structures around there.
Yeah, that's really awesome that you get to enjoy some of your passion like that with some of your travels. So that's really cool. Well, thanks again, Henry, for coming on to STEM Thing to talk about today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We might even have to have you back on the show. It sounds like there's a lot you can talk about. So, thanks again for coming on.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me.